Wyoming Territory, June 1879. The river was too high for crossing, but they forced her in anyway. Hattie Lowell's boots slipped on the slick rock as the wagon tilted, the mule braying and fighting the current. Her belly, 7 months round, tightened with fear. The men behind her 2 ranch hands and the man she had once called husband shouted something she could not hear over the roar of the Snake River. Then the wagon jerked sideways, and they let go of the reins. She screamed as the water swallowed her. The cold hit her first, like fists slamming into her chest. She flailed, grabbing for the wagon, but it was already tumbling downstream. Her skirts tangled around her legs. Her body began to sink. The weight of the pregnancy pulled her down faster than she could fight. Above the surface, the men turned their horses. She saw them. They saw her, and they rode away. Hattie knew what this was. They had meant for her to die. She kicked hard, broke the surface, and gasped. The current yanked her again. Her arms and legs were failing. The sky above her whirled. She thought of her baby. She thought of her daughter, Lisa, and her son, Levi, both buried behind the abandoned cabin in Montana. She thought of how no one would come looking, but someone did. He ran along the riverbank barefoot, his dark hair whipping in the wind, bow and quiver slung across his bare shoulder. He stripped off his weapons as he ran, eyes fixed on her, on the drowning white woman in the river. He jumped. The water swallowed him too. She barely saw him coming. Her body was going under again when strong arms hooked beneath hers, lifting, pulling. She coughed and choked, lost in the cold and the roar, but she felt him. He held her up, kicked hard, fighting the current with fierce, steady strength. They swept downstream, but he never let go. It felt like forever before he dragged her to shore. They collapsed together in the mud, her back heaving, his chest rising and falling fast. He rolled to his side, looking at her. She blinked up at him, dazed and shaking. He was young, maybe 30. Strong, lean. His face was calm, his mouth tight with breath, but his eyes, dark and fast, scanned her for injury, then her belly. "You are with child," he said, his voice deep and careful. She nodded, coughing hard. He knelt beside her and pressed a hand gently to her side. "You hurt?" "I know I do not think so," she said, voice hoarse. "The baby, it is still moving." He looked relieved. "Good," she stared at him. "Why did you jump in?" He did not answer right away. He sat back on his heels, dripping wet, then looked at her again. "Because you were drowning." Her eyes filled with tears. He helped her sit up. She looked downriver. The wagon was gone, everything she owned. Her food, her blanket, even her boots. "They left me," she whispered. "I saw," he said. She covered her face, sobbing. "They were supposed to take me east. I paid them. My husband, she could not say it. He did not press her. He picked up a blanket from his small pack and wrapped it around her shoulders. "My name is Tahke." "Hattie," she whispered. "Hattie Lowell," he nodded. "You are cold." "I will build fire." She watched him move with quiet purpose, gathering dry grass and striking stone to steel. His movements were fast but calm. Within minutes, smoke curled upward and flames licked at the kindling. He added wood, then helped her closer. "You are Lakota," she said softly. "Yes. You live out here alone," he glanced at her, then nodded. "Hunt alone, travel alone. My people are near Rosebud Creek, but I come west for elk. You are far from any town." "I know." Her voice broke again. "I did not have a choice." He did not ask more. He dug into his pack and handed her a strip of dried meat. "Eat." She chewed slowly, staring at the fire. Her hands shook. When the sun dipped low, he stood and offered his hand. "Come, we must move. This place not safe." She hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was warm, firm. They walked inland, her body aching, her bare feet raw. He gave her his moccasins without a word. She tried to refuse, but he shook his head. "I will make more." They found a small hollow surrounded by cottonwoods. He built a shelter of branches and bark. She sat and watched him, unable to stop the tears that kept coming. Not loud ones, just quiet, steady. That night she curled beneath the blanket while he kept watch by the fire. In the morning she woke to the smell of cooked rabbit. He handed her a strip and sat beside her. "You saved me," she said, voice shaking. He looked at her, eyes steady. "Yes." She looked away, then back. Why did you not hesitate? His jaw moved slightly. Because no one else did it, she blinked. You did not even know me. I do now. He looked down at her stomach, then met her eyes again. I will not leave you. Something in her chest cracked open, tears slipped down her cheeks. I do not know where to go, he nodded slowly. Then come with me, she stared at him. Why? He tilted his head slightly, thinking. Because you are strong and kind, and I saw you fight the water, you did not quit. She covered her face again, overwhelmed. He waited. When she lowered her hands, he was still there. That night she leaned against him by the fire. He let her. His arm came around her carefully, warm and solid. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since Montana, she felt safe. The next morning broke slow and gray, the sky low with clouds that clung to the edges of the hills. Hattie stirred from sleep beneath the lean-to, her legs aching, her breath visible in the cool air. Tahke crouched a little ways off, stringing a new arrow with steady fingers. She sat up, pressing a hand to the side of her belly. The child moved beneath her skin, a quiet roll. She exhaled sharply and looked toward him. Do you have people waiting on you? He didn't glance up. No, her brows pulled together. None at all. My uncle died last winter. My sister lives near the Bighorn. She has children. I do not stay long in one place. She pulled the blanket closer and watched the way his hands worked, smooth and practiced like he'd done it 1,000 times. There's a small town east of here, she said. I saw it on a map once. Star Valley, maybe. Could be 2 days. He nodded once, tying off the fletching. You want to go there? I don't know, she said. I thought I did, before. He slid the arrow into the quiver and stood. We can go if you wish, or not. She shook her head. I can't live in a town not like this. They'd look at me and wonder what I did to deserve being left behind, and the ones who ask those are worse. He studied her face. Then we won't go. A blue jay called from the trees. Somewhere beyond the rise, water ran shallow and fast over stone. She looked toward it. Do you ever want to go back to your sisters? No. Why not? She has a husband, and she worries too much. Hattie let out a breath that might have been something close to a laugh. You think helping me won't worry her? She does not know, he said. And you are not helpless. Her eyes flicked toward him. Feels like it. You stood up yesterday, you walked. That is not helpless. She looked down at her hands. I didn't expect to live. He stepped closer and crouched near her. You did more than live. They broke camp without hurry. He packed what little they had with care, tying his bundle tight and offering her half of the dried meat he'd kept back. She ate slowly, watching the tree line. The world was wider out here, but quieter too. Her ears still rang from the river, but the hush of the wind in the branches soothed something deep. They walked the edge of a ridge, keeping low. Her pace was slow, but Tahke never rushed her. When she paused to rest near a patch of sage, he crouched beside her, scanning the distance without speaking. I was a different person before Montana, she said after a while. He waited. I had a house. A little one but warm, a porch with 2 rocking chairs. My husband was kind in the beginning. Then he wasn't, and then he left. She didn't look at him, but she felt his listening. I buried both of my children before I turned 25, she said, and I still thought I could begin again. I was wrong. He was silent for a long moment, then said, You were not wrong. You are beginning again now. She turned toward him. You think this is a beginning? He met her gaze. Yes. They made camp near a low bluff, the river now a distant memory behind them. He found a hollowed place beneath a rocky ledge and lined it with dry grass. She sat by the fire, watching him work, her hands resting on the swell of her middle. When he settled beside her, she said, How far west were you planning to go? As far as the elk take me. She tilted her head. And if they turned east, I would follow. She smiled faintly, then looked back at the flames. I don't know where I'm meant to be. You do not have to know yet. The fire cracked. She turned toward him again. Why did you really pull me from the river? His gaze held hers. Because I could not watch you die. Her breath caught. He looked away. I have seen death. Too much. I will not let it take someone who still fights. She looked down at her lap, then back at him. You're not what I expected. He raised his eyes again. What did you expect? I don't know. but not a man who'd build me a bed of grass and give away his shoes. I can make more shoes, he said. She laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar in her own mouth. I don't know what to do with someone like you. Just stay by the fire, he said. That is enough for now. She did. By the third day, the sky had cleared, and the trail sloped into a long, open valley flanked by trembling aspens and the dark rise of pine. The wind moved quietly through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. Hattie paused often now, not from weakness but from the steady weight of her child shifting lower in her body. Tahke adjusted his pace without being asked. He moved just ahead, clearing the path of sharp rocks, sometimes offering his hand when the slope steepened. He said little, but his presence steadied her. They came upon a stretch of land where a collapsed homestead had sunk into itself. Only the chimney remained upright, leaning slightly east as if tired of standing. Hattie stopped beside it, resting a palm against the stone. Someone built a life here once, she said. He nodded, scanning the horizon. Not all stay. She studied the broken boards, half buried in grass. What makes a place worth staying? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward a flat patch of earth near the line of trees, knelt and touched the ground. Then he stood and looked back at her. Water runs beneath here, he said. Shallow, you can dig for it. She stepped away from the chimney and joined him. You've camped here before? No, he said. But someone did. The land remembers. They made camp there not out of necessity but because something in the stillness invited them to linger. Tahke walked west to set snares. Hattie gathered kindling. Her hands worked without direction, her thoughts caught in the ache of her back and the way the afternoon light stretched gold across the valley. Later, after a quiet supper of roasted quail, she sat beside the fire, legs folded beneath her. Tahke sat cross-legged across from her, carving a length of wood into a shape she couldn't yet guess. What were you like as a child? She asked. He didn't look up. Quiet, always watching. Did you always hunt alone? At first with my uncle. After he died, I did not want company, she nodded, turning the edge of her blanket in her hands. I used to talk too much. My mother said my mouth moved faster than my thoughts. He glanced at her. You still speak less than most. She smiled faintly. I've learned to wait. He set the carving down. It was beginning to resemble a bird wings tucked close, head bowed slightly. Waiting is not weakness, he said. Sometimes it is the only thing left. She reached out slowly and picked up the carving. You make things with care. Everything has shape before it is born. I only help it find the right one. She turned the bird in her hand. Were you ever married? No, by choice? Yes, she met his eyes. You don't seem alone. I am not, he said. The wind stirred the fire. She set the carving down gently and shifted, her body heavy but no longer unfamiliar. She watched the way he sat still but alert, like a deer just before it moves. I was married once, she said. He was older, not cruel at first, just always certain he was right. About everything, Tahke waited. I stopped believing I had a voice, and when I did speak, he didn't hear me. You are heard now, he said, her throat tightened. She looked into the fire, then back at him. You don't try to fix me. You are not broken. She pressed a hand to her belly. This child, I don't know who they'll be, but I want them to be free, not afraid of their own voice. They will be, he said, because of you, because of both of us. Silence stretched between them, not tense but deep. When the wind shifted, Tahke stood and added another log to the fire. Then he settled beside her, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth from his shoulder. She leaned toward him slowly, resting her head against his arm. He didn't move. After a while, he angled his body just enough to support her weight. You never ask me what I'll do when the baby comes, she said. I do not need to ask. Why not? Because you have already stayed. She closed her eyes. Night settled soft around them, and no one moved to speak again. The fire burned low. And for the first time in many seasons, the quiet held no fear. The baby came in the dark before dawn. Tahke had been gathering willow bark by the creek's edge when Hattie's cry cut through the hush of night like a blade. He dropped the bundle and ran, feet bare, chest pounding. The fire still burned low in their camp, casting trembling light over her face as she gripped her knees and fought the pain that had woken her. He dropped beside her, his hands already moving to steady her shoulders. How long? Her jaw clenched. Started not long after you left. It's coming fast. He nodded once and rose to gather what they had: boiled water from the kettle, a strip of cloth, the thick linen she'd sewn from his old shirt. She breathed through gritted teeth, sweat beading along her brow as another contraction seized her. I need to lie back, she said through gasps, but not flat. He helped her shift onto the folded blanket, propping her with his pack. She gripped his forearm hard enough to bruise. Don't leave. I won't, she bore down, her whole body bowed with the weight of it. He wiped her forehead with a damp cloth, his grip steady, his voice low. You are strong, her breath hitched. I'm scared. He pressed his hand gently to hers. I know. The hours passed, slow and aching. Pale light crept into the sky, brushing the peaks to the west with silver. Birds began to stir in the trees, but the world around their camp stayed still. When the child came, it was with a final cry that emptied Hattie's lungs and left her trembling. Tahke caught the baby in both hands, wrapped it quickly, and knelt beside her. A boy! Her eyes filled as she reached for the small, squirming bundle. She held him close, her breath uneven, her body hollowed by the labor. Tahke sat beside her, watching as she traced her son's face with careful fingers. He's warm, she whispered. Isn't he warm? Yes, she looked over at him. I didn't think I'd get to hold him. You have him now. She nodded slowly, overwhelmed, and rocked the child gently. He quieted against her chest, his mouth searching before latching with instinct. She winced, then settled. After a while, when the sun had cleared the ridge and warmed the camp, she looked at Tahke again. Do you want to hold him? He hesitated, hands still. If you wish. She offered the boy to him. Tahke cradled the infant with reverence, his large hands supporting the tiny limbs. The child blinked up at him, face still red, breath soft and steady. He looks like you, Tahke said. Hattie tilted her head. You think so? The eyes. She laughed once, quiet and tired. I think he looks like someone who got lucky. He looked up. So did I. She reached for water and drank slowly, then leaned her head back against the blanket roll. I haven't thought of a name. Do not rush it. She watched the two of them together, her son's fingers curling around his first anchor in the world. I used to think I'd give birth alone, she said. Somewhere cold, afraid, I imagined it that way more than I care to admit. He handed the baby back to her, his hands brushing hers. But you didn't? No, she looked down at the boy. You were here. They sat in silence, the fire snapping softly behind them. A hawk circled overhead, high and slow. Hattie turned toward the warmth of the sun and closed her eyes. When she reopened them, she said, I'll need a place to raise him. Tahke nodded. There is a low valley east of here. The soil is soft, pines on one side, open grass on the other. I can build a shelter there. She looked at him. For me or for yourself? For us. Her throat went tight. She shifted the baby to her other arm, then looked at him fully. What would that look like? He met her gaze, voice even. We would live where the land is good. I'd hunt. You'd grow what you could. We'd raise him together. She didn't answer right away. The wind stirred the grass. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker tapped lightly against bark. She glanced down at her son, then back to him. I think I want that. You do not have to decide today. I already did, she said. The moment you pulled me from the river, I just didn't know it yet. He didn't reach for her, but his eyes warmed and she felt it like touch. I never wanted to owe anyone anything again, she said. You don't. I want to stay because I choose to, not because I can't do it alone. I know the difference now, he nodded slowly. Then stay. She leaned into him, their shoulders brushing. The baby stirred between them, letting out a soft sound. Hattie smiled, her lips against her son's hair. We'll need a name for him, she said. Tahke looked out over the land, then back at her. What would you call something that began again? She thought for a long moment, then whispered, Ashwin. He nodded. It is a good name. The sun climbed higher. The boy slept. And in the hush of morning, Hattie rested, no longer waiting to begin. They left the valley before the first leaves turned. Wind carried the scent of drying grass and the low hum of the season shifting. Hattie walked beside Tahke, Ashwin tucked close to her chest in the sling she'd sewn from an old flour sack he'd traded for with a trapper they met near the ridge. The baby dozed against her, small and warm, his breath steady. They moved east, where Tahke had spoken of softer ground and pine shelter. The journey was slow. Hattie's body was still healing, her steps cautious, but she didn't ask to stop. When Ashwin stirred, Tahke would pause without needing her to speak. He'd unshoulder his pack and wait, eyes on the land, until she gave a small nod and they walked on. One evening, they reached the edge of a meadow bordered by cottonwoods. A narrow stream ran cold and fast through the middle, and the slope behind it rose gentle toward a stand of fir. Tahke stood for a while, eyes scanning the tree line, then down to the soil. He knelt, scooped a handful, rubbed it between his palms. "This is it," he said. Hattie didn't speak at first. Her gaze moved over the clearing, the hush of the trees, the open sky above them. Ashwin stirred and settled again. "It feels like a place that doesn't ask anything," she said. Tahke nodded. "Only that you stay." He built the shelter by hand. Cut pine and tamarack, stripped bark notched the beams. She helped where she could, holding lengths of wood steady, weaving reeds for the roof, her fingers learning the rhythm of it. They worked until their shadows stretched long behind them. By the second week, the frame stood tall and square. When the last timber was set in place, she stepped back and looked at what they'd built. "You've done this before," she said. "Not for myself." She reached for his hand. "You have now." Inside, the floor was packed earth with a bed frame of lashed poles and a wide hearth dug into the far wall. She laid Ashwin down on a folded quilt and stood beside him, watching the boy's fist curl around nothing, his mouth twitch in sleep. Tahke stepped behind her, silent. "I've never had something that was just mine," she said. "Not like this. You do now." She turned, looked up at him. "You didn't need to stay." "I didn't want to leave." Her throat tightened. "I don't know if I know how to be with someone, not really. You already are." She reached for his face, fingertips brushing his cheek. "You're not what I would have chosen before, I know. But now I see you and I know." He leaned into her touch. "Then we begin." That night they slept with Ashwin between them, the fire low, the roof holding steady above. Rain tapped soft against the walls. Outside, the meadow breathed. As the days grew shorter, they planted rows of winter greens. Tahke fletched arrows while she mended seams. Ashwin grew strong, his eyes dark and watchful, his cries quick to quiet when cradled against Tahke's chest. One afternoon, Hattie stood at the edge of the stream, sleeves rolled, skirts tucked high. She pressed wet linen against a rock, scrubbing with steady hands. Tahke approached quietly, a bundle of dry kindling under one arm. She looked up and smiled. "I almost forgot what it felt like to work for something lasting." He laid the bundle down and crouched beside her. "It will last." She wrung out the cloth and set it on a flat stone. "Do you ever think about going back to your people?" "I carry them with me." She reached for his hand. "And what about me? Where do I belong?" "With us," she nodded. "That's all I needed to hear." They married before the first frost. No preacher, no paper, just the two of them beneath the trees, a small braid of sweetgrass burning slow between them. She spoke first. "I offer what I have, my hands, my voice, my days. I will not leave, not even when it's hard." He took her hands. "I give what I am, my strength, my hunt, my name." They sealed it with a kiss, slow and sure, Ashwin gurgling nearby in a woven cradle. The fire kept burning. Snow came early that year, blanketing the meadow in silence. Inside, the warmth held. Ashwin learned to crawl, then stand. He walked first to Tahke's outstretched arms, fell into him with a laugh that echoed against the walls. Hattie sang when she worked, not loudly, but enough to fill the room. She carved spoons from driftwood, taught herself to stitch patterns into cloth. Tahke watched her sometimes, his gaze full of something deeper than words. One night, after Ashwin had been laid down, she turned toward him near the fire. "I used to think I'd never love again," she said. "That it would be safer that way." He didn't speak, only waited. But then you walked into the river, she said, and I started breathing again. He took her hand, pressed it to his chest. You are the breath that stayed. They lay together that night in the hush of the firelight, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Outside, the wind moved gentle through the pines, and inside, nothing was missing. Years passed. The shelter became a home. Ashwin grew tall, sure-footed, his bow strung tight, his laugh full of light. He spoke both languages, rode bareback across the ridge, and read the wind like his father. On Hattie's 35th birthday, Tahke gave her a carved box, long and smooth, the wood dark with oil. Inside was the bird she had once held by the fire, the one he had shaped when they were still strangers. She looked at it, then at him. You kept it. I made it for you. She brushed her thumb over the wings. It's still perfect. So are we. They stood in the doorway, watching the boy run through the snow, feet flying, arms wide. The sun broke through the trees, gold and soft. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I never thought I'd be safe again. He kissed her hair. You are home, and she was.